Ka-chow. Yeah. Skadoosh.
Bow.
And Aaron, I think we're live. People can see our video. People can hear our words. So I release you from your durance vial if you would like to, I don't know, do whatever it is people do when they're not like helping me be a monster.
I'm free! To the shadows!
I like you went with Back to the Shadows instead of like Genie from Aladdin. That's a good take.
Oh, we all know what this is. Yeah.
You're really chained to your mortal life.
So everyone, welcome to the stream. It's been a while since I've been on here. And thank you for joining me today while I talk to Dot from Kobold Press. And discuss a project that I got invited to, and somebody just actually used these stupid channel points to say they want us to play Guess That ASMR. No, that's not what we're doing right here.
You know what? If you hang around for this whole chat, we'll do it at the end.
Oh boy, no, I don't
No,
like.
can't do it.
That's a threat. That's not a promise.
That's a threat.
That's like, if you stay here, then I am going to hit your knuckles with this ruler. Everyone hates. There's a few people who love Guess That ASMR. I love it, but I'm perverse that way. It's like
Great. Well, we'll save the perverse hour for the end if you're really into that, everybody. If not,
that will be sort of a
tell
later
your
stream.
enemies and tell them to come hang out with us.
There you go. If there's anyone out there you really hate, make sure to tag them on Twitter right now. And I will do terrible things to their personal soundscape. But anyway, Dot, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, first off, thanks for letting me come hang out. I'm the Twitch producer for Kobold Press, so I'm here to do the Twitch things, and right now the big thing happening at Kobold Press is Vault of Magic, which is this tome of magical stuffs, really, compatible for 5e, so that's what I'm all about. I've been talking a lot of magical items over the last few weeks as the Kickstarter's been going, so thanks for letting me come over here to talk about it.
No, it's a delight. I'm always kind of careful about the projects I pick up these days because, for one, there's just so many hours in the day. But the other thing is I have been forced to come to grips with the fact that if I am part of a project, people will just sort of go and do it. And that means, like, early on, there was some near misses where like people were maybe getting lured into things that I wasn't I was thinking, oh, I'll do this as a favor to a friend.
Right.
And but the upshot was they're not things that I would really be excited for my people to be involved with, or I didn't want to implicitly like give it my stamp of approval. Yeah. But this was great. I knew a little bit about you, but it wasn't until I sat down on a video chat with Wolfgang where I'm like, oh my God, this is not these aren't some folks maybe doing a little Kickstarter for their like their second ever game book. It's like, you guys have been around for ages.
It's true, yeah. Actually, on the 20th, we celebrate our 15th anniversary.
Wow.
15 years, Wolfgang's been out there with friends and, all those in between, all the kobolds in between, making this content, which is kind of what Vault of Magic, one of the things Vault of Magic is, right? So, like, you and a lot of other guest designers have been putting all these magic items in it, which is really cool. But the other half of it is actually magic items from our past. So they're going back through every release we've ever done, including Pathfinder and 3.5, and they're digging for all the magic items that have like real sustenance to them, and they're putting them in this like anthology almost.
It's a cool thing, and I gotta say, 15 years is impressive enough. But Wolfgang himself, like, when we started to talk, he was like, well, and I hope I'm not telling stories out of school here, but he's like, yeah, I was back with D&D and I wrote for Dragon Magazine, and I was with TSR. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yep. Oh, we are of the same generation of D&Ders. I used to, when I was over at Wizards working with D&D for a while, I they had to eventually say, hey, Pat, we love you. TSR, we're not TSR. Like, and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It's been that way my whole life. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, TSR, it does exist, but it's off there. We are D&D. This is Wizards of the Coast. And I'm like, thank you. Sorry. Super sorry. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, I just turned up Dot a little bit.
Thanks, friends. Let me know if I'm peaking now, because I also turned up, so. Up to 11.
So, but yeah, so personally, I kind of want to just jump in and talk about the thing that I am most excited about the Kickstarter.
Can't wait. Yeah.
Because I was, excited to come in and just goof off. At first, I was like, because this is the other reason I have to limit the number of projects I do, is it's hard for me to do something just a little.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to do something and only, and this, Aaron, if he's watching this, or any of my team, they know the truth of this. It's hard for me to do something and not try to do it perfectly. Like me settling, like there's the thing they say that the great is the enemy of the good.
Yes.
Which is to say, like, if you're trying to do something great, you're gonna, like, it'll stand in the way of you getting something done that's good. And so like I get that, and I know that that's true for a lot of people. For me, I am so much farther down that road. For me, one of the things we're trying to do here in my business is settle for excellence, because excellence is a step down from what my normal toggle is actually perfection. I want it 100% right. I want it 5 nines fine. And so like settling for 98% for me feels like such a concession. Right. Let alone like the fact that I need to be aware that sometimes sending an email that does 70% of what I need it to is okay. And this is why I again, it's part of that is me learning better coping mechanisms and prioritization. But part of it is me just not doing as many things so that I can be my, be my normal obsessive self in places that it's worth it. And so so how about this, everyone? Let me tell you a story. Oh, dang. I'm sorry, Dot. The way I've adjusted our Zoom here, people can't actually see your pronouns. I'll just let everyone know. Everybody, Dot is she, her. She has it listed there as well. Yep.
And I'll say it out loud. Dot, she, her as well.
Thank you, by the way, for putting those on there.
Totally.
Everyone, I didn't even have to ask. Here's what happened is like, hey, do you want to come do a magic item? And I'm like, I do like magic items. And then I'm like, do I really want to like sign up for this? And I'm like, you know what? They want an item description, 150 word write up. And I'm like, I'm going to go talk to my boys, to my kids, because this will be a fun thing we'll do together. Let's make a magic item together. And then they'll eventually be able to see it in a book, and that'll be a fun together thing we'll do, because my boys and I tell what we call adventure stories all the time, which is it's a little, I tell a story and they play a character in it. I've been effectively prepping them for tabletop RPG for their whole lives since they could talk.
You get the best dad award.
I mean, it's
best dad award.
it's pretty great. It's great to do as a dad, quite in addition to like whatever benefits we'll reap later by being able to play.
I have to just say, Tolkien used to do that for his kids.
Yeah.
His collection of the Christmas stories he wrote for his kids is like Letters Left Behind for Christmas. There's a book collection of them, is out of this world. So
Yep.
gold star, Pat.
Yep. So I'm like, but let's see if this works. So I sat down. I'm like, can we think of some ideas? Like, there's a couple of classic items that show up in the stories that we tell together. And we did it for maybe half an hour. And I have this huge list of items. And I'm like, and so again, this is the other thing that happens is we call it Rothfuss project creep, where I'm like, oh, actually, it turns out what I really want to do is do a whole book of items that just created with me and my kids, but again, so I picked one of these and I started writing it up. And then I pinged Wolfgang and I'm like, hey, so here's my idea. And I've started to write it up. And I know you said 150 words. But because I can't do anything normal, I've kind of created a fake historian in this fictional world who's writing a book where he investigates the mythology surrounding magical artifacts, and he is talking about this magical item and his experience with it. And it's going to take more than 150 words. Is that okay? Is that okay? And oh no, Nate Taylor's here. Nobody knows the Rothfuss Project Creep better than Nate Taylor. He's my friend and sometimes illustrator. And so he's like, no, that's cool. And so I did it, and then I came back. I'm like, okay, so here's what I got, and I pitched the idea to him, and we'll get to the idea. We'll talk about the Fulton door in a bit, but then I'm like, okay, so it is longer. Here's my idea. He's like, well, it's funny you should mention this. We're doing a new thing here, and they're like legendary items or they're fabled items. And initially, I thought of it more as like, oh, this is an item with sort of some folklore and superstition around it. And so I'm like, oh, cool. Like, that's where I live. Is it okay if I do one of those? And he's like, sure. He goes, that's about 350 words for some of the folklore and then like 150 words for the item description again. I'm like, cool. So I go away and I come back and I'm like, so I've gotten the initial excerpt from the book that the guy is writing. I've gotten that down to 600 words. And I go, and I'll cut it down further if you want. And the item write-up, I'm going to leave to you and your people, because like writing good descriptive explanation of like rule mechanic is a very underrated skill. And it's one that like good, concise, and clear.
Yep.
Like,
yeah, and shout out to our editors at Kobold Press. They're incredible. That Megan, who's heading this up, just like cheers to her.
And so he was like, and that's where things stand right now. I actually, right before this, I was literally just talking to the editor, Megan, and I'm like, because what I didn't know, I thought that they had some fabled items and some of these items that like change and grow with the characters, items that can whatever. And I thought these were separate things. And it turns out they're the same thing. And I'm like, oh, I had not necessarily built this in. So I'm like, can we get on a call right now? Because I already have some ideas. And so we just chatted, and it was a very good talk. And I feel really bad for, is she, her as well?
Megan?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And so I felt a little bad for her because and I'm like, okay, so I know we only have 15 minutes. I have 2 ideas. And as I'm explaining the first one, I'm like, actually, I have 3 more ideas. It could be this. I go, what would work best? This or this or this? And we could do these 2 and then this 4th one. And that would fit together. I go, also, here's an idea, but that's more narrative. And I don't know if that fit into the mechanics. And so she was very forgiving and understanding of my manic bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
But also, and here's the first of many laudatory things I'm going to say about Kobold Press. She was like, yeah, I think we can do all that. And I'm like, oh no. Oh, I didn't expect that. Here's a bunch of options. Which of these sound good to you? And she's like, well, those all sound good. I think this one probably fits better. And so we're going to talk more. I had joked at one point with Wolfgang, and I'm like, I'm so sorry I keep missing these word limits you're sort of giving to me. And I'm like, if you want, when I announce this on my blog, we could do a separate goal. And like, if we hit that goal and it's like, give Rothfuss a second page so he doesn't have to cut this stuff that he wrote.
Oh, I can see the hashtag now.
But so anyway, that is just the story of like how Kobold has been really kind and really understanding and really forgiving and willing to work with me and keep in mind they're currently doing a Kickstarter and putting up with all of my shit, which is really above and beyond. But again, I have to say, the idea of items that change and grow and develop as your character develops is something that I had to homebrew back in the day, and I've never seen it implemented. And I love it. It's brilliant, and I'm stunned that it actually doesn't already exist as a mechanic.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that's really neat about a lot of Kobold's product, or that I'm finding, because I'm really new to the Kobold family, so I'm kind of like a fresh Kobold that's just like taking in as much Kobold Press as I can. And so as I've been digging back through, and I've got my Midgard world book and all this kind of stuff, the magic items and a lot of the things that they come up with are really unique, and they use a system we love, right? We all know D&D, or choose your edition, right? Choose your edition. It doesn't matter. They've written for it, and so I think it's really. They love the creative process, right? So where you're saying it's your shit, we're thinking this is awesome, right? This is awesome. Like what a unique idea. It's already building into something that we're kind of pushing boundaries for. And so, I'd like to say you just kind of added some chemical X to our pot.
Well, I'll also say, there are some projects where I'm like, okay, hey, Pat, will you do a thing? And I'm like, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And then I do it and then I stop. But knowing that you guys really care about your product, knowing that you're willing to discuss, and like you guys valuing the same things that I value, both in terms of a business, in terms of what you're trying to promote in the genre, like good narrative, good inclusion, sort of, working hard to bring more narrative elements into a system that was never really at its core designed to promote narrative.
Right. It was, yes.
And again, I'm not trying to pick a beef with D20. What I'm saying is, I have seen other systems since then that as you use the system, it promotes storytelling. Whereas D&D was first to market, but it was modeled after war games.
Right, it was combat. It was
a combat system that you can do good role-playing in. But again, my gripe always was, it's like, oh, cool, my character is second level, I've created them doing this, and you're like, I got a magical dagger, and this is like the big, like, and again, I come from the old dark ways where it's like there was no saving throw to come back from death.
Right.
You
was
just
dead.
You dayed forever, you know?
Yes. I remember.
And so, but like I got a dagger, and now I'm and like it was such a like plus one dagger, and there was a description attached to it and whatever. And then like you hit 4th level and you find it +2 dagger, and you're like, well, but my other dagger though, like I've had that. I've had that.
Abandoned it.
Yeah,
I named
like,
it.
I did. I named it. Like I wrote it on my character sheet in ink. And I'm like, so knowing that you're building it effectively, this means items will have character arcs. They'll have narrative arcs, and that your arc can include this item, and you don't just, Adventure Time, the cartoon is cool. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that Finn keeps losing swords and having to get new swords all the way through Adventure Time.
Yep.
And that's cool. And I love it because you normally don't see it, but this gives you the other experience that's more common in media. It's like, Elric doesn't get another frickin' sword. It's his at the beginning. Right. It's his whole deal is the sword.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's so cool to see somebody finally really like leaning into that mechanic.
Okay, so we're leaning into the mechanic. What is it? You have to tell everybody, what is it, Pat? What did you make?
Oh, okay, yeah, I suppose I should talk about the thing I did. Okay, now, but first though, somebody here is like, they're like, my wizard, and if they call their dagger anything, it's last resort. Not back in the day. You only had one spell, my man. There were no cantrips. I got to cast magic missile once a day. And like, unless you're like a narcoleptic, I'm like going to do one room in this dungeon, then fall asleep. That +1 dagger is a big deal. Anyway, no, I'm not gonna go there. Like how and so here, let me say, Dot, how close to the vest have people been playing it in terms of talking about the details of their items publicly?
I call this the moment where you ask whether or not, how many beans can you spill?
Yeah.
I've pretty much been told you can spill all the beans that are official beans.
Okay. So, here's what I'll say. First off, point the first. This is an in-progress item that, as you know, I literally just talked it over with the editor, not even an hour ago. And we're going to be changing and shifting things. But the idea actually comes from my younger son. Initially, he liked the idea of, I can't remember if he called it, I think he wanted a door that would fit in his pocket.
Oh, a tiny door?
A door that would effectively, and maybe this came from some story that we shared at some point, because he did have a pocket horse for a while. It was a horse that you could unfold and then ride.
Okay. Oh my, that's so cool.
It is actually so cool, right?
So cool. Yeah.
And, and so what he wanted was a folding door that you could bring out, and then it's a magic door.
Okay.
And because a 7-year-old doesn't have a great grasp of what is OP, although my 11-year-old does actually use he's like, that seems a little OP. He's like, it's a door and you can carry it in your pocket, and you pull it out and you put it there, and then you can go through it to anywhere you want. And now, of course, any experienced GM is like, well, how about that destroys everything in my game forever?
Right, there goes travel.
Yeah, there goes
weather and terrain.
Terrain and everything. It's like, it's like, how about also maybe just also any locked door ever? Can you just use this to walk through into a treasure vault? Can you? And
it makes me think of the Acme hole.
Yes.
When they like slap on anything and you just reach through to the other side. Yeah.
Yep. And so, what what we're doing, what I pitched is this, and again, that obscenely long historical write-up talks about, and you'll see shades of it in this historian who has the horribly titled treatise. It's something like Gold from Dross, Examining the Arcane Underpinnings of Peasant Superstition.
Yeah.
And so he tells the story of his children coming to dinner, all full of excitement about stories their governess had told them about a hero with a folding door. And they're like, Daddy, can you make me one? And and I'm actually really fond of this write-up, and this is a paraphrase, not even as good as a paraphrase, because this guy just this is the worst piece of like so full of himself academic writing that I've ever performed, because he's like, unfortunately, my children had not reached the age of reason and did not know how foolish this. Nevertheless, they recognized my puissance, their father's potency as an artificer, and they desired me to create. And I explained to them how instant point-to-point teleportation, and not conjuration magic was foolish in the extreme. However, I soothed their young minds with the anecdote that etymologically the concept of a folding door was quite interesting. I'm so glad you're laughing.
This is so good. I can see him writing this, like, vigorously, right? Like, in a thing like this, it's like angry dad mode, but not really angry dad mode, because it's really proud dad mode, you know what I mean? It's like, I just love it. I just love it.
And then he's like, I explained to my children that actually historically there's a wizard named Fulton, who did specialize in conjuration magic. Unfortunately, a lot of details are lost to time because his lab, his notes, his manor house were all destroyed in a terrible cataclysm. And then then it jumps forward to him doing his current day research. And he's like, I found somebody selling a fragment of the Fulton door. And they claimed that if you took this piece of a door and you incorporated it into a real world door in a specific way, then you could use it it would form a portal anywhere that you wanted. Or the specific mechanism that I'm pitching, that I'm kind of proud of, is you build it into an existing door using whatever the appropriate craft is. So like carpentry, if it's a piece of wood, but you could find like a hinge or a piece of metal or a piece of stone door frame or a piece of glass from a window in the door. In which case you'd need to be a glazier to like appropriately incorporate this glass into a window.
Right.
And then you take a key to a door somewhere else, and you can put that key into this door, think of the place, turn it, and then it'll work.
Oh.
And so this keeps it from being overpowered. It's not going to ruin your whole game by letting people teleport around everywhere whenever they want. And there's a failure state because, like, odds are your wizard isn't good at carpentry.
Right, there's a craftsmanship to like building the thing, which is really neat. Like an artisan side of the magic.
Yeah, and it also effectively keeps this from being an instant solution to all of like, oh God, we need to escape, or oh no, we need to. It's like this is something you have to do some craftsmanship to, or like it might not work. And so that was my initial pitch. And then so I wrote up this, and of course the guy writing this up says, like, I went home and I did it, and it didn't work. And so I had the man arrested. This sort of charlatanry cannot be borne. You know, how dare he take my 19 gold pieces? And so what we talked about just an hour ago is how do we make this item scale? Mm-hmm. And so we actually have had a couple of different ideas, and we've thrown it back and forth. That is a little up in the air. But you know, I'm loving the conversation so far, and the basic concept is pretty sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really it kind of it's like a more permanent version of what is that druid spell? There's one where you can like walk from eventually like at a higher level druid but it has to be a tree you've seen, like come in contact with, and then you basically can teleport from tree to tree. So you could teleport back to a tree that you have like been to before, which is the limitation on the spell, right? It's not like you can teleport to any tree.
Right.
It's got to be a tree that you've like marked or a tree that you know. But yeah, the craftsman aspect, and you know, this fabled item we've interviewed a lot of our designers, and I think you're the only one we've interviewed that's making a fabled item. Like actually make one of these bigger ones, because a lot of these magic items, which I think is really neat, are what we would consider mundane. There's like magical butter and spices, so if you need to like spruce up your cooking, you know, like your kind of everyday mundane items that get lost amongst the realm. But something like this is really story driven. It's a really story driven item.
A door by itself tells a story, you know?
Yeah.
And so like all of the items that I came up with my boys, you know, because they're like, you know, one of them I think was like, you know, I'm kind of proud of the fact that only one of the things was a weapon, because typically in the stories that we tell, they're not for that. It's not a big action movie of a story, because I don't want my kids sort of running around in narrative just brutalizing the world.
Right.
You want tension from like emotion, and you want them to solve problems, and you know, and you know, so a lot of the things we had, you know, I love the feel of like a non-earth shaking magic, you know, and honestly, something that takes you from one place to another. And again, as this item levels up, you know, if we do take it in that direction, there's so many different interesting things that could happen. Like maybe what it does, because again, I envisioned this the only way I felt comfortable kind of pitching it, because they said like low level, accessible, not great game breaking things, because we want people to actually play with these.
Yeah, use them.
And I'm like, cool, a one-time teleportation. It's like, that's a great, like, you find that at second level, you're like, hell yeah, I'll spend a day with a hammer and saw,
right,
making a magic door. You know, but the thought of you find this, and maybe if you play your cards right, this can develop into something where maybe it is more permanent. Or maybe, you know, I mean, who knows? Maybe depending on how it scales, maybe it does end up being a door you can put in your pocket, which would be some pretty level 20 stuff.
I mean, let's just talk. What if the person making the door is like a pixie? They're gonna make a tiny door for pixie doors, right? Then it's pocket size, technically.
see, what I'll say is like I have also made those items, which is, it's like, oh, like, because eventually, back in the day, at any rate, like as a DM, I got kind of salty with my players. It's like, because they're like kids that want candy. It's like magic item, and I'm like,
yeah.
I'm like, shut up about you. Okay, you know what? Yeah, you get that cloak of protection. It's lavender. You gonna wear a lavender cloak, Macho Man? You gonna wear this cloak? It's like, have your magic item. I want you to suffer for this. It's like, oh, you want this? Sure, you get it, but it's pixie sized, you know? It's
yeah. It only fits your thumb.
Right. And I'm like, that I'm not proud of that behavior, but like,
Right.
that was some back in the day sort of adversarial gaming that of the sort that we shouldn't have
But
so
I
much.
think that says a lot about magical items and like why we need good magical items in our
Right.
games. Ones that are story driven. One of the big conversations that's it's had is like, do we design our magical items around our player or around our characters, our PCs, right? Are you designing these items to help boost their story? Are you doing it for the arching story? I think about man, this door, what if the bad guy was building this door and you're trying to stop him from getting the materials he needs to like build the door?
Yeah.
Like that could be really epic in its own way.
And some of the obvious stuff for me is like, if you're, if you start by just finding this and thinking, oh, it's a little one-off thing. And of course, if you're doing teleportation and there's a craftsmanship involved, either the craftsmanship is meaningful or not, which means, and if you're going to make the skill meaningful, that means there have to be like consequences for not doing it well or rewards for doing it very well. And that means, ultimately, what are your failure states that are narratively interesting for teleportation? Like the biggest one is like, nah, you donked it so bad that like you don't have a magic thing anymore.
Yeah, you broke it. Good job.
You broke it. But that's, again, narratively interesting? No. It's like, getting hurt, sure, a little. But unless, like, my arm is stuck in a pig, it's not a long-term interesting thing. I drink a healing potion, and then it's done. I mean, although I will say arm stuck in a pig is pretty big. Leg stuck in a pig, that's a good long-term consequence.
Yeah.
You could build a whole character around that. Pig leg.
I call it pig leg. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I've got this. It's a barbarian character now. I just see it. Like a dwarf barbarian with a pig for a leg.
Arr! Instead of a parrot on your shoulder, you have a pig leg.
I have a pig for a leg.
But again, more narratively interesting is like what if there's, what if like if multiple people are going through, what if you're separated in the teleport?
Yeah.
Now, narratively interesting, but then I've just forced the DM to split the party, which is not necessarily a cool thing. For me, the interesting thing is you go somewhere else. And that's a good like narrative starter. But also, what if what's going on is if somebody else has a fragment of a Fulton door, and maybe they're working on their own little character arc over there with that, maybe it takes you there. Maybe somebody opens a door into your Fulton door, like
right comes the other way. Like doors go both directions
in your lab, right? Like where you've been working on this thing. And somebody here, again, you're thinking the same way I am, says make sure the doors have limited range, and the more of the pieces you collect, the range. Also, this person brings up duration, which in my opinion is a big thing. Because maybe if narratively, what's more interesting to me is if this works and the door opens, great. Now it's not just a teleportation spell, because again, that's cheap, but an actual, like, what if you do a good job and then this door works for an hour? Like, that's a whole different thing. You can use that for something. What if it works for an hour, but it doesn't need to be contiguous? You open it, you have to kind of, what if it works for 5 minutes, but you have to save it? Like you rush in and out.
You get like a life bar on the,
right, yeah.
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of really cool things that you could do with the door, which again, you mentioned this earlier. I think a lot of times we think magical items are a weapon. It's something that can be like used in combat because, where we start to where we are now. But just about anything can be a magic item if you you have the right purpose for it. You know what I mean? And that was I think that's really, really neat. It's a door, but it's not just a door.
Yep. And yeah, and again, I if I was writing this up, and again, like, heaven help anyone who eventually reads a gaming book that I have an active hand in developing, where it's sort of like, ultimately what I want to talk about is say, so, hey, here's how this could work, or maybe this is how it works, or maybe this is how it works. And the nice thing there is it shows, it encourages a diversity of experience, and it encourages everyone to make this thing their own. Like, here's what I'll tell you won't happen. There will not be 7 pieces to the Fulton door, you know?
Right.
Like, because that's just the Rod of 7 Parts. And the reason everyone knows about the Rod of 7 Parts is that it plays off of this thing. The Rod of 7 Parts has a narrative. You find a part, and then you're like, oh, this is what? Well, I guess I know what I'm doing tomorrow.
Right. I've got a new adventure.
Right. Now, I don't get, your campaign, whatever. Part two of this story is me getting the second part, and then the third. All I care about is the Rod of 7 Parts
It's
now.
the parts now. Yeah.
Yep. And so I'm not making the Door of 7 Parts. And that's why I love talking about these as fragments. And so that means the GM can either be kind of benevolent and say, oh, you're playing Magnus Burnsides, you're following in the path of Travis McElroy, you're a carpenter. Oh my, like, what? You found a plank from the Fulton door. Like, go buck wild, my man. Like, use this skill for your magic. Or if you are a cruel and terrible GM, then you're like, great. You know, who is a glazier? Anyone here a stonemason? Are you a blacksmith because what you found is a hinge pin?
Right. You're going to have to make it out of paper plates and macaroni otherwise, you know, like, yeah, I'm sorry, gang. I love it. You know, I was even thinking on the tiny door, the pocket-sized door, what if you come out the other side and the door is too small?
Oh, my God.
What a repercussion. Like, you're trying to get somewhere, but that world is like a Fey world, can be tiny. So if you come out the other side, can you even fit through their door?
What if as a consequence, like, your critical failure is the scaling on the door is wrong, but not like little big. What if it's merely the door you incorporated it into is 10 feet tall. The door you're going into is 8 feet tall. So you step through and you are now scaled down 20% permanently. Deal with it.
You're permanently smaller? Oh my gosh, what a horrible kickback from this door. I love that. So every time you use it...
Oh no! And then it's like, use it as many times as you want, bucko.
I dare you.
I dare you. It's like, you better go back through. You want to go home? Because you better go home.
Yeah, you bet. Now's the time to turn around and not open this door again. Tomorrow you'll be at 60%.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Wow, that's some evil GMing. I love it.
So again, I love the thought of people being able to fit this into their play style.
Yeah.
People being able to be like, and again, I really like to push back against what I experienced through a lot of my childhood, which is the adversarial, like, player DM thing that used to happen with me. Instead, now these days nobody asks because everybody knows about role playing. But it used to be, you know, confession time, everyone. I used to LARP. And people would be like, hey, you want to see a movie? And I'm like, oh, I LARP on Friday. And they're like, what's that? And I'm like,
oh, here goes. Yep.
And because it wasn't even like the cool kid Ren Fair LARP. It's like, I used to vampire LARP. Like, you know. Yeah, I figure you wouldn't judge, you're right?
Yeah, but I even got my bats on today, y'all.
Yeah. And so, but how do you tell this to a normie, right? Because I was doing this pre-2000. And so what I would say is like, oh, and they're like, what's a LARP? And I'm like, oh, it's effectively collaborative improvisational storytelling, which is actually what it is. And
that's the perfect description.
Yep. But honestly, I feel all role playing should be collaborative, improvisational storytelling. It's not the GM's job to tell you a story. You're all doing it together. And that's why people who have been game masters are better players, because they're willing to carry a little bit of that weight, you know?
Yeah, they know.
They know.
They totally know.
Yeah.
So, okay, obviously, we all know that you've got this kind of deep history, right? And obviously LARP, but also TTRPG and fantasy. And you've probably come across a butt ton of magic items in your days. Question. You got to have a favorite one. Like, what is maybe it was given to you as a player, because I know that that's kind of special when you don't have to be the GM for a bit. Or maybe it was another one you came up with. What is that item that you're just like, man, this was good?
There's a lot I could talk about. I have already talked publicly about my boy's favorite item from the adventure stories, which is a magic rope. But I've talked about that before. The one that I think is interesting to talk about here, and I'm guessing a lot of people who are tuning into the stream, they've watched me play Viari, and so I'm kind of tempted. Like, I will say professionally, my favorite magic item is the Apocalypse Dagger from when I would play with Chris Perkins and the Ack Inc. crew.
Yeah.
And again, what did I love about that? It's like, I got it. I picked someone's pocket and got this dagger from this cultist. And then every time and he'd be like, is that with that Apocalypse Dagger? Because I called it the Apocalypse Dagger because it was obviously the ritual dagger, and I kind of looked
Right.
into it, and she was looking to bring about the end of the world. So I just started calling it the Apocalypse Dagger. And then every time I hit somebody, he's like, is that with the Apocalypse Dagger? And I'd be like, oh no, that one's. And then finally I got a crit with it. It was either a crit or a critical failure. And it blew my arm off and wrecked a big chunk of the world. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, like, thank you, Chris Perkins. Like,
yeah, basically you were carrying around a nuclear weapon and had no idea. Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And so, I loved it. I loved it. And effectively there, my only regret is that, like, he didn't leave me with one arm for at least a whole session of play. It's a little harder there because it's not a weekly session. We would play a couple of times a year.
Right.
But the other one
Wow.
is way back as a kid when I was playing in high school with my initial core group of friends. There was a dagger that there was the same mechanism where I just got it. And my friends and I talk about collaborative storytelling. We played together. There were 3 of us, but nobody wanted to be left holding the bag constantly running the game. So we would all run for each other, and we would play a character at the same time.
Oh.
So each of our characters had a folder that the other 2 could write things in and put things in. That, like, for my character, I could not look in that folder, but they knew things about my character and, like, what was going on that I didn't, including this magical dagger that I'd found. Eventually I would learn things about it. And again, that's all about the narrative. There's more to sort of become known about this magical item that you found. I like that slow roll and that slow progression, as opposed to, like, you go into town, you pay 100 gold pieces, you know everything about this item.
Right.
And it is the same as 1,000 other magical flaming swords in the world. It's like there's a factory somewhere that just rolls them off of an assembly line. We want more we want more, like, we want more meat than that, you know?
And I think if you think about all those magical items from fiction, right? Like, just out there from all of it, everything you can think of fantasy-wise. The ones that stick with you have story built into them.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Sting and the Ring are 2 very easy ones that are like, these aren't just any other sword. This isn't just any other ring. And those are like giant, huge examples. But I think you could think about a ton of other. Like somebody in chat was like the wardrobe from Lion the Witch and the Wardrobe.
Yes.
Magical item.
Yep.
Magical item, right?
And as the story progresses, you learn that it was made from the apple tree that came from, like, it's like that. Oh, wow, that's cool.
Right.
And actually, Sting is a great example where he's like, oh, I guess I'll have a knife now, or it's big enough for a sword for me.
Yeah, I'll take this sword. Yeah, this is my size. Yeah.
And Gandalf, and then they get to Elrond, and he's like, oh, these were made in Gondolin for the Goblin Wars.
Yep.
And he's like, and Bilbo's like, well, that's nice. That
alrighty.
I feel cool about that. And then they're in the mines under the mountain. And then he sees that it glows. And so like that is a story. Mm-hmm. He's learning more about this thing, and then he calls it Sting because he's using it. Like that's how a magic item should be in your narrative.
Yep. And then it passes. That same item then passes, which is also like an extended story. So yeah, I think there's sometimes we can fill our world because our players ask for it with a ton of magical items, and what they actually become is unimportant.
Yep.
Right? Because then they're just factory made, or I just bought this +1 dagger of blah blah, or I earned it because I took it off a goblin's body. Like, why the hell would a goblin have a +1 dagger? Anyways, right. And so like we can do it that way, but I think when you slow it down and you give that real story purpose to a magic item, it can just have a more impact in the long run on your players, on your story, and you avoid the thing that I hate as a GM, which is you give them a magical item and they don't use it.
Yeah.
That one's fun. The one that stays on the belt because they're too afraid to like use the thing, and then they never touch it. And you get to the end and you're like, why didn't you break out the thing to do the thing,
See, not to like go go in a different direction here, but there's, again, like in terms of systems that promote narrative, Monty Cook's Numenera is great, and the thing that I love there is because I play a very tight game, which means you don't drink that potion. You need it for later. Like all of these one-off things, you save all your magic items. But in Monty Cook, you find these ciphers, which are these one-off items. And like, depending on how savvy your character is about this weird, like, technology magic amalgam that exists in this world, it's like, if you don't know much about that, it's like, cool. It's like, if I push this button and do this sticks in the air. That's cool, but it only works once. It's like, if it's a nut, and if I eat it, then I glow, and I my skin is like bronze for 10 minutes. Cool. But then I get a third thing, and it's like a sentient hairbrush that tells my future, But oh no!
It comforts me when I'm alone.
Right, it's just it helps ameliorate my ennui. Oh my God, can I get that in the real world, please? So actually, I'm going to change now. Fulton door is out the window. I want to do a hairbrush. You brush your hair.
Sentient hairbrush, please.
And it just combats depression. Oh my God, how could I have missed that opportunity?
Just like, man, talk about the item we all need in 2020.
Right.
Oh.
But in that game, if you have, it's like, I don't know much about these weird tech things. You get the hairbrush, and then suddenly it's like, oh no, I feel real bad in my bones. And then you throw up blood because like all of these things interact in ways you don't understand.
Yeah.
And so you have to use them. And that's what these one-off items are for. You can't just hoard endlessly. You have to use them. And it's such a great mechanism that promotes you, like you moving, you like getting on with your life and not being a
you can't be a hoarder.
A fantasy hoarder. Yeah.
In Numenera, you can't be a hoarder.
Yeah,
that's interesting. And I think I'm really excited. They've got an entire section of Vault of Magic that is consumables.
Yeah,
consumables are those things that like really you either overuse them like a GM and you just shower your party with them and then they never use them because there's no mechanism to use them, or you just avoid them like the plague because you're like, I don't want to have to deal with like how many times you can sip or drink this, or did it go away, or did you use the thing, and I think that consumables can add a lot of really interesting levels to a game. So I'm really excited about consumables, which are those one and done kind of things, you know?
Yep. So here's the thing. This is kind of the hour we're allotted. I don't want to trap you here longer than, I mean, you're busy, but I will say this. I was going to maybe, I usually try to let people in my chat ask some questions.
Yeah, for sure.
But before I do that, everybody, hey, we've been talking about this. I know the link has showed up in the chat. I will just say, if you like this talk, if you're into role playing, you know, it would certainly make me look cool if while I was streaming, a bunch of people wandered over and maybe back that Kickstarter, and then they would realize that maybe it's worth it to put up with me. So if anyone wants to wander over there and back that Kickstarter, I would not participate if they weren't cool folks producing a good product. I will say, if you're not into, into this particular thing, or if you've already backed it, consider wandering over to their Twitch channel and maybe give them a follow, because if you're into this sort of thing, they do this sort of thing, and they're good-hearted people who really want to be a good part of the community. So, can one of my mods drop a link to the Kobold Press Twitch, so that people can maybe go and give them a follow? That would be lovely. And also, after we do a little bit more chatting with Dot, I will throw it open for about 10 minutes of Q&A. Thank you, everybody, for dropping that in there. I'll do a little bit of Q&A from the chat. Any questions you have about world building, role playing, we'll keep them a little tight. We want sort of popcorn questions.
Yep.
None of this, how do I make an interesting world thing? That's a seminar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 You know what? So one of the things I've been doing with all of our guests is actually asking them like a lightning round of questions, like ridiculous and like as fast as you can answer them.
Cool. You first, and then we'll go to the chat.
Okay, perfect. So I'll do a couple. I have a list, but let's see if I can remember off the top of my head. Okay. If you could pick any beast to be your best friend, which beast would it be?
Squirrel.
Not the answer I expected. What is your favorite trap?
Oh, no, I thought of the trap that killed Will Wheaton in Acquisitions Incorporated. It's not my favorite trap. I'm sorry, Will, if you watch this. It's not my favorite trap. I will say a deep pit that is filled with loose, light dust.
Oh, no.
Because you cannot climb out and you suffocate.
That's horrible and wonderful.
I'm a monster.
Notes. I love that. Okay, last question. Before we move over to chat, and we can grab your questions. Let's see, which one do I want to do? Oh, if you could give your magic item to any one person, for real person, who would you give it to?
If I had just a fragment of the Fulton door, I probably would. I'm tempted to give it to Travis Mcelroy, because he played Magnus Burnsides and he leaned into the fact that his character was a carpenter. Maybe Travis, and I love that.
Yep.
I love that or honestly, maybe I would give it to Justin McElroy, because Justin actually does woodwork.
I was going to say, he's an actual carpenter, right?
He does, yeah. And that's a little bit, because he could use it well, and also, I mean, there is the added bonus that it would kind of chap Travis's ass a little bit if I gave it to Justin.
I love it. I love it.
I will say, if I had two pieces, I would give one to each, right? Don't make me choose.
Oh, I see what's happening. Pat just wants to sip tea and watch drama.
Yeah.
I see that. You just want to set him up for a little drama. I love it. Yep. All right. I'm done asking questions. Let's let them ask them questions.
Okay, chat. We got 10 minutes, and then I gotta go. And I'm gonna let's see what we have here.
We had a couple a while back. By the time I find one question, there's gonna be 1,000 more in chat. I just know it, because that's how time works. It's weird.
Have Pat and the McElroys ever played D&D together? We haven't played D&D. When we were on the Joko cruise together, we played a game. Oh boy, it was a game called that they had played before. That was 3 Sherlock Holmeses and a vampire, and then and it was just a little micro RPG. When I played it with him, it was 4 Sherlock Holmeses and a vampire, and we all played together, and that was a delight. I have played games with the McElroys, and they've also agreed as a stretch goal for the charity that we did this year, they're going to come in and stress test the game system I'm developing for Temerant, my world.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of building it up kind of from first principles. What do I want in a game for good stories of the sort that my people will like? Dot, here's one for you. Your lipstick is excellent. Can you share
thanks.
the brand or the color name?
I can not at the moment because yes, I can. I lie. It's right here. I wear a brand called Folklore.
Ooh.
And the color is called coffee. There you go. It's great for all your makeup needs. Not sponsored.
Here's how did you start at Kobold Press? I don't know if that's me or you. I will say I got introduced from one of the broadswords. Introduced me over there, and they're lovely folks. I was really glad for that introduction.
Yeah. I've been with Kobold since November. I've been playing TTRPGs online for a while. I'm a self-producer and podcaster, that kind of stuff. But yeah, they needed somebody to come wrangle their Twitch channel. I was the dot for the job.
Cool. What's the most surprising item you have gotten or seen in a campaign? Surprising item. I think when I was playing with Critical Role and as Carrick, when I came in the second time, there was a big treasure vault, and Matt actually brought in the deck of many things, and I'm like,
Oof.
Matt, you're better. Matt, you know better. This
is when things get bad.
This is usually the end of a campaign.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want to run this game anymore. I'm going to give them the deck of many things and let them destroy each other.
Oh, wow.
When Kvothe played his spoiled noble son routine to get clothes was that is a question more about the books. So I'm gonna push off. I'm gonna wait on that. Oh, here. How do you feel about intelligent weapons? In terms of books, I think they're great, and it's just effectively another character. In terms of bring them into your role-playing game, it's kind of a fraught concept because, for one, you're effectively saying, hey, it's sort of like if you have an animal companion or like a talking, like a little pseudo-dragon, and it can talk, and it's your familiar. Effectively, if you want that because you think it's cool and you just want to constantly talk with your pet dragon, effectively your GM now has a part-time job.
Yes. Which
is just to play your cool dragon pet. And that's probably not what their primary goal for running the game is. Similarly, if you have a magic sword that you can talk to, first off, if it has an alignment, that is just the whole concept of alignment.
Now it's a new character.
It's a new character that they have to play all the time. So I just say, like, cool idea. Really, it's such a burden on the GM. How do I start with D&D? That is a very big question. If you just want to learn about it, you can do worse than listening to an accessible podcast. But I'll say this: if you don't know anything about role playing, D&D is great. There's other places like the One Shot Podcast Network, where they play different games every week. And so you get to see the vast variety of different systems and play styles out there. I listened to them play a game where it wasn't like a fantasy world and you're all wizards or whatever. It's like, it's summer camp. And you're creating camp counselors, and then problems arise, and it's a cool story about summer camp. One Shot will show you the ropes in terms of like what is available in terms of narrative game tabletop experience in a way that I've never experienced anywhere else. There's a reason James is my partner that I will be developing this role-playing system with for the eventual Temerant podcast.
Yeah. You know what? I believe Wizards of the Coast for a while on their YouTube had a series called Learn by Play.
Yeah.
Where you actually learn to play, so you could go watch others learn to play. That's sometimes very helpful. I think it was called Learn by Play, and it's over on their YouTube.
Yeah. Somebody says, what's your favorite system other than D&D?
Oh,
That's hard.
The thing is, my personal favorite is probably right now Genesis.
very narrative system.
Very narrative system. It's going to be hard for me to come up with a system that's better than that for my world. And I'm going to steal from it two-fistedly, because it does its job really well. But in terms of, I'm not saying that's the best system, because if I was going to play a game with people, what I want to know is like, what are they looking for in the game? And what sort of a player are they? Because the best system for a game depends on what you're trying to accomplish and like what sort of players are your players. And everyone who's, even if you've only just done D&D, you've seen this problem arise where it's like there's a difference between you're at the table with you and four gamers versus you and four role players. Those are very different games. And what's awful is when it's you and two gamers and two role players and everyone's always unhappy because they're only getting half of what they really want. So I don't know about favorite other good systems. I mean, I enjoyed the hell out of Teenagers from Outer Space back in the day.
Oh, that's a good one.
White Wolf was really cool. I mean, Storyteller changed things. Mind Eye Theater is a great, simple, functional, mechanical system for LARPing.
Yep.
But for about 20 years, I did nothing but Champions. I built everything mechanically in my world in Champions, but it is a beautiful mathematical trap. And there's no better mathematical trap out there. But if you do not want to get mired in system, don't play Champions.
I was about to say I'm a Fate fan. I really love Fate. I'm a huge Fate player, but 2019, 2020 really brought me into love of pretty much anything Free League publishes. I mean, of course, Kobold Press, but like Dot really loves some Free League.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. I might do one or two more. This is last chance. If you would, please consider wandering over, check out the Kickstarter that's being linked here. If you've already backed the Kickstarter, if you like the cut of Dot's jib here, which is, just to be clear, that is a sailing term. And for the avoidance of doubt, I would like to officially go on the record. And check out the Kobold Press Twitch channel. Maybe follow it, and you'll get to see other people. Mm-hmm. The other people involved in this, they have Luke Gygax, who I've met, and he's a cool person. Deborah Ann Wohl, who I've played with, who is also...
Her item is my favorite.
Has she announced it? What is it?
Yeah. Okay, you want me to tell you? Okay.
Yeah. But real quick, because I'm going to have to...
It's a set of Matryoshka dolls, and each doll does something different, so they look totally normal, but every time you undo a doll, the doll does something different.
And
they're really tricky and weird, and each one's designed kind of funky. I love it. If you want to see some more of these items, everybody, Kobold Press's YouTube channel, we've been archiving all of our interviews with our guest designers, including Luke Gygax and Deborah and a whole bunch of others. So that's the best place if you want to just learn more about the magic items going in the book.
Can somebody also drop a link to the YouTube channel in there?
I got you. That's what I'm here for.
Yay. So again, there's a ton. Oh, cool. Somebody already backed it here. So, and now here's the other thing. If you're interested in this, if you've enjoyed this stream, feel free to follow me here. And also feel free to share around the tweets or on Facebook or wherever you found this stream. Share it around to your friends if you think they would enjoy it. And you know, I'm saying if you like this sort of thing, if you want to support independent game publishers, you know, if you want to sort of support innovation and diversity in the field, this is a great way to do that. And if you are a little strapped for cash yourself, but you still want to support, you know, show up to the YouTube channel, give them a follow on Twitch, share things around on social media, or best and in some way easiest, just personally tell one friend.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Because like every book that I found probably in the last several years that I've really adored, it's that a friend has just said, this is a good book. And I listen to that, whereas like, I see 1,000 things on Twitter and I don't give a shit. Again, thank you so much, Dot.
Thank you for letting me come hang out in your space. I appreciate that. Yeah.
And again, another reason to follow the Kobold Press Twitch channel is like, we don't have anything scheduled right now, but it wouldn't be weird for me to show up and do more of this stuff over there someday. Just saying, because I like the cut of their collective jibs. Still a sailing term. So I'm gonna let Dot go, and then I'll chat to y'all just a little bit to wrap up the stream.
Perfect. Thanks everybody so much for letting me come hang out, and you know, I'll see you around. I like the cut of your jib.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.